Good morning. Here I am back in my summer room. I have to be quiet because I got a baby sleeping inside the door. It doesn't feel like a summer room. I don't know, it's every Saturday morning. It's cold. Today it's raining. I want to continue the discussion I had in the last video about, I titled it, Watch Before You Quit. There's a couple other factors to consider. First, I want to talk about company culture. Just bear with me, it's all related. I was in the auto industry. I did auto parts for a long time. I did mushrooms before that. I did some garbage before that. What else did I did long haul before that. In every one of these industries, now I'm in the industrial waste industry. Every industry has its own culture. Every company has its own culture. So going from auto parts, when I was doing auto parts, I was autonomous, meaning I didn't have to have anyone knowing my business. I could disappear into the fleet. I could go to work, get my paperwork, do a quick pre-trip, jump in my truck, take off, and I'm gone for the rest of the day. I didn't have to talk to anybody if I didn't want to. And usually I listen to books. I've listened to hundreds of books in my truck. So there was that aspect. It was autonomous. I didn't talk to management very much other than getting my dispatch. It was just me by myself. I didn't have to deal with people. I touched on that in another video. Didn't have to deal with customers. It was go, 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 right? Factory on wheels. You have to get those auto parts where they're going on time, and you didn't have time to screw around because we did slip seating, and we had other people waiting for our trucks when we got back. And anybody, every now and again you get the odd driver. I don't know if they were just inconsiderate. New drivers I wouldn't consider them inconsiderate, but older drivers that knew better, who would stop at every restaurant, at every truck stop, knowing that they had someone waiting for their truck to get back, right? Their slip partner. So generally speaking, it was go, go, go. People were usually considerate that way. So that was the culture I was used to. Then I switched into industrial waste after a really long time. And now all of a sudden, everybody knew each other's business because it was a small yard. You could see the unofficial chain of command, right? Who had more influence. You don't have much privacy. The pace is much more laid back. You're paid by the hour, not by the mile. And it's you're not moving quick, right? Because it's dangerous work. It's in your interest to move slow. So you don't move as quick. The pace is more laid back. And the work, not just being more dangerous, it's also more highly skilled. The skills that I had to develop were just exponentially higher than when I did auto parts. So all that to say, culture is something to consider before you quit. I mentioned I had a really good friend who just he had to go back, right? And he had to go back to the auto parts because the culture shock at this new place we found ourselves working at it was too much for him. It wasn't his thing. In other professions, one of the questions I'm told managers will ask you during a job interview is whether or not you believe you will be able to handle the culture. If you've been at a company or in a profession for more than a couple of years, right? You'll hear business professionals will say, the questions that managers will ask is, can you handle this new culture? They're implying that you're stagnant. Well, there's truth to that. There is truth to that because it is actually terrifying to go from being one of the top drivers, knowing the company inside and out, going to another company where you don't know jack. You don't know anything about the equipment. You don't know anything about the industry. It's all new to you. You're not used to having management in your face. You're not used to your co-drivers knowing all your business. You're not used to doing teamwork, which I never did any teamwork. Now I do. You know, I felt like a dilettante. I got so overwhelmed just learning the equipment that I would actually screw up the most basic things about coupling and uncoupling a trailer. I was so overwhelmed. I couldn't handle it. I never actually had to operate a trailer before, so that was just, it was different. So there is something to the idea of culture because it's terrifying. And if you fail, right? If you fail at that new venture, you have to consider, what are you going to do? Now, I mentioned in the previous video, at my time doing auto parts, I saw a lot of drivers. They would quit and they would come back, only to go back to the bottom of the seniority list. I saw it in a couple different companies I was at. Now, I have some co-workers who got lucky and they got their seniority back, but mostly, if you've been gone for more than a few weeks, you're not getting your seniority back. And a couple thoughts on this whole thing. Going back to a company, I'm a big believer. If you quit a company, you should move on. Because you hated the company or it was time for a change, something made you leave. If you end up going back, like so many of my coworkers did, all you're doing is giving management the right to abuse you. Because now they know you're afraid of change. They know you can't handle change. They know you're comfortable where you are. They know you'd rather go with the devil you know than learn a new skill. So it gives them the right to abuse you. They can exploit you. They can make you sit around and wait for hours for a trailer because they know you don't have the balls to leave. So that's something to consider. You know, it's fearful moving forward. It is terrifying moving forward because you could fail and maybe you have to go back to where you were. But generally speaking, even though it's scary moving forward, even though it's scary learning new skills, even when you're a bit older like me, I still say it's worth it. Generally speaking. Generally speaking, it's worth it because why would you stay somewhere you hate? Why would you stay somewhere it's constantly causing you stress that you don't need? You know, you hear people say you got this one life to live, right? Why spend the remainder of your time working for a company that you absolutely despise? I hear from people that I know some of the most horrendous things, not horrendous, that's a bit extreme, that's over the top, but people doing some of the most ridiculous things because they stay where they know they should have left. Personally, I was ready to have a blowout. I quit before I got fired. I was tired of it. It wasn't the company's fault. I just needed a change. And I came to realize that. But yeah, I think you got to go. But before you do go, you got to consider, how do you handle new situations? That's something for you to consider, you know. And how old are you? If you're an older fella, maybe it's best you stay where you are. If you're only a few years away from retirement, you went that far, maybe you should just consider staying where you're at. But if you're younger, like me, I got about 15, 20 years left in this career, probably, unless I find something else. I think you need to leave. I think you need to go to a different company and realize there is life outside of your present role. You know, when I did auto parts, there was another auto parts company in town, and I always thought, if I quit here, I'm going to go over there. That was my out. The problem is, if I went to the other auto parts company, I'd be working afternoons, and I made it clear, I don't like working afternoons. But I couldn't, the reason why my mind went there is because I couldn't imagine life outside of the auto industry. You know, and there is life outside of the auto industry. This world of transportation is huge. You know, so I suggest look around. Look around. You know, like I mentioned before, download the Indeed app. See what you're worth. See what's out there. You know, it is worth looking around, but it is worth considering. Once you quit and you give up your seniority, you may be back at the bottom. You may not get a chance to get your seniority back. You know, it could be the best thing that you ever did, or it could maybe make your life worse. There is no easy answer to this, but I still generally say, if it's time for you to go, it's time for you to go. Just like I said before, be intelligent about leaving and realize that you will experience a massive culture shock. I wasn't prepared for it. I did want to run. I felt like I wanted to run. I wanted to turn tail and go back to what I felt comfortable with. I'm sure glad I didn't. I would still do part-time, I guess, in that other industry, but I would never go back now. So anyways, that's all I got this morning. You guys, everybody have a good Saturday morning. Have a good Saturday morning. Be safe on the road.